So now we're going to start looking at some of the yogas to start fine-tuning and picking even better times for the muhurtas we're picking. So a lot of these have come from my first Jyotish teacher, and these are just some of the most important ones that we picked out. There's plenty more you might find out there, but these are just some things to consider. And I've listed these. I'm not going to go through all of it, but just a general idea. You can use this as a reference of how to work. I've listed the details to consider on top of the other things. So you still don't want to forget looking through all the knowledge I gave before, but these are some added considerations for when you're looking at things. So for example, the first one, steer yoga, is good for destroying illnesses. So, if you're starting a medicine or working with a doctor or, trying to get some kind of care, choosing a muhurta like this, if it's not an emergency situation, can be really good. So if Thursday or Saturday, so see here, once again, we see a Saturday being good for seemingly malefic, but it can be good. These are the nakshatras and then the tithi. So if you can have any combination of that day, that nakshatra, and that tithi, then steer yoga is formed. Okay, so that's how you read that. Ravi yoga is best for all auspicious activities. It's just a very strong placement. You can see here it's like a strengthened lagna. So in a horoscope, the lagna, if you have a strong lagna lord, you can overcome, even though there may be difficulties, you can generally overcome something. And so Ravi yoga gives that same effect. So even though there may be difficulties, if Ravi yoga is in operation, there's still a good muhurta there. To find this one's a little trickier. You want to find the nakshatra that's in operation for that day, and then you want to count to the nakshatra of the sun. Okay, and that's an inclusive count. And so if that inclusive count is 4, 6, 10, 13, or 20, then it's considered Ravi yoga's form. The next one is Raja yoga, and this is just good for auspicious activities, pujas, even weddings, coronations, any kind of thing like that. This is similar with the steer yoga. So if the day lines up, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, if it's one of those nakshatras, and if it's one of those tithis, then Raja yoga is formed, and it once again can mitigate negative effects, much like that Siddhi yoga I showed you, where the tithi and the day aligns. These are a little more specific, a little more powerful, but when all these elements align, then these are formed. The last one is Kumar yoga, good for relationships, education, household things. So certain, Venusian, Jupiterian kind of energy coming in here. And once again, check up those days, those nakshatras, those tithis, can be good for those types of activities. Okay, so a little different energy coming on those. So these are good times if you are struggling finding, having all the panchang elements line up. You can come to these, try to find some of these, stick out some of these, and that'll help you pick a better day. And what I used to do was, every year I would just sit down for like a day and go through the panchang and kind of identify, where a lot of these good yogas are forming and the Siddhi yogas, and just mark them. So then that way, when I did need to pick a day, I could kind of see where a lot of these were, and then see if the other elements lined up. And it was a good way to do that instead of having to kind of pour through this all the time. Just good to sit down. If you're planning out your year or your month, however you kind of plan, it's good to mark these off on your calendars. Another one which is extremely powerful. So we had the Siddhi yoga, which was the tithi and the day lining up, but this is Amrit Siddhi. So this is the nectar of the Siddhi. So it's like the purest of the Siddhi. So it's very, very auspicious time if you can get these lined up. And these are even more specific, however. So for this one, it's a little different. So for example, the first one, it has to be Sunday, it has to be Hasta Nakshatra, and the Tithi, it has to be the fifth Tithi. So these are even more specific. They're easier to find too when you are looking through the calendar. So, these would be good days to choose, and, very important things you want to start for the year. Each one, Monday has a specific one, so you can't just mix and match the days and the nakshatra and tithi for this. It has to line up specifically. I've got a note on here. There's a specific one too called Avisha Yoga, which is the opposite of this, which is just horrible. So instead of getting the nectar, you're going to get a lot of poison. And this is if it's a Saturday, if it's Rohini, if it's the 11th Tithi, then you want to avoid anything important on that day. And these things do come up, so it's very useful. So something to watch out for. And some other cautions on there associated with this. If you're doing this, avoid marriage on Thursday with this placement, arrival or like entry into a new house, or arrival from a trip or something. Avoid that on the Tuesday with this, and travel on a Saturday with this. So in general, that Saturdays are just not good days to go traveling or start a travel, because Shani is represents delays and obstacles. Saturdays are good general days actually to end traveling. So if you need to end a trip, a Saturday is a good day to come home from somewhere or whatever. If you are planning, it's another general consideration. It helps give a stop to that activity. Okay, so really important yoga there. Check it out. Which now we'll move on to the difficult yogas. And these are ones that you want to avoid as much as possible. And once again, I've given the indications here. Kalamukhi is a death-like yoga, or a feeling of death, so to speak. And this comes into play with all these different placements. So you can see the first one, it's Chaturthi, which is the fourth Tithi. So these numbers are Tithi. So whenever I list a number here, it's a Tithi. Fourth Tithi, and any of the Uttaras, Uttara Falguni, Uttara Ashada, Uttara Bhadrapad, that forms Kalamukhi. Panchami, so the fifth Tithi, and Magha once again forms it. And you can read the rest. We come here to Tithi Nakshatra doshas. So these are, once again, when a specific tithi aligns with a specific nakshatra, a certain dosha comes into play. So once again, something you want to watch out for. Avoid anything very, very auspicious on this day. And once again, don't let this freak you out for day-to-day activities. If you have to go do something, go to the dentist or doctor or something. Don't let it freak you out. But if it is a really important thing, like you're getting a root canal or a surgery, then you want to take some of this into consideration a little more. But, once again, you can look second Tithi and Anyarada forms of dosha, so something to be avoided. Jwalamukhi, volcano, once again laid out, the Tithi and the nakshatra to be avoided. Mrityu, which is death inflicting. And this is a day with the nakshatra. So here it's Sunday in Anyarada, Monday in Uttara Shada, Tuesday in Shada Bishak. So once again, something to be avoided. And the last one on this list is Yamaganta, once again, specific day with the nakshatra. And, once again, don't let it freak you out. Use these, especially when you're fine-tuning events. If not, go about your life. Don't worry. You're not, it's not going to kill you. This is a secondary consideration, but something to look at as well. And this is when a certain tithi aligns with a certain day, so much like the Siddhi yoga we showed you before. Similar thing coming here. Dagda is burnt, tormented, Visha is poison, Hutasana is fire, fear, this burning kind of energy once again. So this is very, it's once again a secondary consideration now. You may want to look at this chart when you have a very specific muhurta you need to get in place. Now we're going to move on to a very important section, and this is going to help really fine-tune the time. So you're going to want to go through all of this, and it seems like a lot, but once again, the more you get used to Jyotish, the more you understand the principles behind all this, and you can look at a chart and it feels like a lot of memorization, but you'll be able to read it a lot more quicker. But when you're learning, you can go down this like a checklist for super important events. And you're not going to get all these things lined up, especially with this chart specifics, okay? With the Panchang elements, a lot of times you can get a lot of really good placements all lined up, or Siddhi yogas in effect, or different things. So a lot of times you can get really good effects with just that. But with the chart, when you're starting to pin a chart to a time, you're not going to get all these, but you want to get as many of them, or as least confluence of negative influences as you can when we're looking at the chart specifics. So first list is things to avoid. And this was a placement given to me by my first teacher, and this was the moon in the 4th, 8th, or 12th from the Janma Nakshatra. So the way this is calculated is you want to take your Janma Nakshatra, and then if the nakshatra in operation for the day falls in the 4th, the 8th, or the 12th house from that, then it's not a really good time for you. And this is a general kind of principle, so you can actually go through the nakshatra list and see how they're lined up with the signs, and you can actually just scratch out a lot of nakshatras that you just can't use for times specific to your birth chart, specific to your birth moon. And this is important when you're looking at specific important times. So it's not a general placement, but when you are picking a really important time for a bigger event, then there's certain nakshatras, even though they may be a good nakshatra, like Chitra, Chitra may be a very good nakshatra for shopping or something, but for my personal chart, it may not be based on these placements. And so I understand the 8th and 12th placements. I never fully understood his reasoning behind the 4th. But he was very steadfast on it, and I've gotten good times with this. So it is a principle to look into. You can consider the 6th house as well, because that is a generally malefic house. It's secondary, not as big as of a concern, but you could put an asterisk on the side of those nakshatras falling 6 from your Janma Nakshatra. Now, when you're pinning the actual chart of the moment, if wherever the lagna is, the moon should not be in the 6th, 8th, or 12th house from that lagna at the moment of the activity. And this is particularly true. You do not want the moon in the 8th house. That's one of the worst placements for the moon. It's associated with Scorpio, where the moon naturally gets debilitated. So it's a specific dosha too. It's very heavy, but in general, you want to look at the chart of the moment. The moon should not be placed there, so you might have to change the lagna, change the time, forward or backward an hour or two, to really try to avoid that. One of the biggest things when you're looking at, along with the moon being alone, moon not being in one of those houses, if you can get that much, then you're doing pretty good. Okay. You want to avoid Sankranti. So this is when the sun just enters a new sign within 1 degree. It's very weak. Sun is, natural karaka for our vitality, and it's a natural karaka for the lagna as well. So if that karaka for the lagna is weak, then the lagna is going to be that much more weaker. So you want to be careful with the sun in Sankranti. Generally not a good time to start new activities. Retrograding planets. sometimes it's inevitable you're going to have a retrograding planet in a chart. Usually what this happens is it makes it harder to achieve the goals of that planet, what that planet's after. And so it becomes really crucial if that planet is karaka or plays a crucial role in whatever activity you want to undertake. So if you're going to get married and Venus is retrograde, it might not be a good idea. Or, if you want to start a new business endeavor and Mars is retrograde, not a good idea, because Mars gives you, that will called parikrama, the courage to kind of take the next step in all your dealings and the power to do so, which is really crucial. And I've seen this happen with certain businesses. So you want to be careful with those retrograde planets. Papakartari of Lagna, the moon, or the Karaka. If the malefics are ever sandwiching, or even in the Lagna with the moon or with the Karaka of the planet, you want to be careful. Along with that, checking for any really bad yogas going on at the time. So, if there's a Kala Sarpa yoga or some of these other things, which we'll get into in later units. But if there's any really heavy bad influences at the moment, you just might want to lay low for a while. During this time, when I'm making this lecture, we've had some really tricky transit with Mars and Rahu together and Saturn on the other side. And, it's been a really volatile time in the world too because of this. And so, I've really scaled back, and my partner really wanted to get a kitty, and I've just been there's a lot of shootings been going on, so it's not a good time to kind of take a leap into something like that. So whenever there's heavier planetary influences, you want to pay attention to that as well. Malefics in the eighth, once again, not a good idea, and these are sub points, but still influential. If the Karaka is in Marna Karakasthana, which are those places where the planet feels like dying, which we covered in our other units, you can double check those. So Sun in the 12th, for example, Venus in the 6th, Mars in the 7th, these places are spots where the natural indications of the planet are not supported. Like Venus, 6 has to do with brahmacharya, Venus has to do with love and sensuality, so it doesn't do so well in the 6. So you wanna watch out for that. And then moving on to the helpful placements. So those are some of the negative things to avoid. Now the helpful things is when the moon is alone and unafflicted. This is one of the most important points. I already mentioned this, but just good to have on your checklist. Jupiter is in the Lagna. We've mentioned this already, but once again, a really important point. Or the Kendras, the angles. Mercury does well in the Lagna. It has Digbala. Venus can be okay there. Or in the Kendras, these are some of the more beneficial planets to have in those placements and can strengthen the chart. And, a lot of this too is just general good chart interpretation. So if you followed along decent enough with the lessons previously, you'll have some idea of what a decent chart looks like, which will help you pick a good specific time to undertake your endeavor. A strong Varalord, so a strong day lord. If whoever's lording the day is strong in the chart, can help bolster the chart. The Atmakaraka, which is we haven't talked about that yet, but it's the soul significator. Basically, it's whatever planet has the highest degrees in your chart is the Atmakaraka, but we'll get into the significations of that. But and it's usually listed in the software, but if you just see whatever planet has the highest degrees and you look for, make sure that's well placed. It's a secondary thing, but it can be important within the life of the chart. The Lagna, once again, you don't want the ascendant harmed. If the ascendant's harmed, it can really harm the whole chart. Same with the ascendant lord, it can harm the whole chart. But if they're strong, and you can have a strong ascendant lord, then that can really help the chart. Next one is moon in the 11th can help. This is a general principle I've seen in lots of different places, including my teacher, and I don't quite understand the placement of it. I know 11th is an upachaya, so it means growth and increase. And so if the moon is auspicious and it's a good nakshatra day, so my only understanding is that would lead to increase over time, and it's a house of gain. So it can be very beneficial. And it's also one of the few places where if there are some benefics with it, it can actually help too as well. It's not as bad if the moon's with another planet there. Still not desirable, but less troublesome than other places. Once again, strong kendras, which we've also kind of noticed. Malefics and upachayas. So malefics, if they're going to be anywhere, it's better to have them in upachayas. These are growth houses. It's places where they can grow. So even though they are difficult planets, over time they can shed and learn. So, tamas is generally seen as a negative thing, but if that destruction is used to destroy bad patterns, like in these upachaya houses, then over time it can be positive. So that's a good placement for malefics to be. Navamsha. You want to check the Navamsha, and Navamsha changes, every 10 minutes or so. So it can change pretty quickly. So, this is a good way to fine tune it. So you want to get the strongest Navamsha Lagna that you can, and also make sure that whatever karakas for the event you're having are strong in the Navamsha as well. The signifying bhava, so whatever event you're taking, and these are really fine-tuning it now. So once again, you're not going to get all these, but just if you can and tweak it, a few minutes here or there, and it can shift to help you, then by all means. But don't get overly worried if it's too much information. At this point, these are fine details when you really want to get a good time. But the signifying bhava should be empty. So whatever event you're undertaking, whatever house is represented that event. So if you're doing education, 4th house is a general house for education. You don't want anything in that bhava. You want it to be free of influence, just like you want the moon to be free of influence. If you're doing something for your health, or beauty, appearance, that kind of thing, that's more of a lagna issue. So you don't want anything in the lagna to influence that. So that's the the signifying bhava, the karaka bhava. Once again, a well-placed karaka, so whatever is the karaka for the event, if it's well-placed, it's gonna totally help that event. Well-placed Aruda Lagna. So once again, we haven't covered Aruda Lagna. Some of these are more details we're going to cover more later, but important to keep in mind. And Aruda Lagna is, I'm not going to get into what it means, but if any Jyotish software should calculate this. It's signified by AL, but that placement shouldn't be afflicted, and the moon should not be 8th from there. Once again, another fine point, but something to watch out for. And then general things on the bottom here. If you're going to fix the lagna, movable signs are best for things that you're doing quickly, right away. Fixed signs, they can result in delay or failure. They can also be good for, things that are permanent. So if it's a fixed activity, that can help. Especially something, it's going to take a while to get done, like building a house or something. And then for dual signs, first half, first 15 degrees, seen like fixed, second is movable. So dual signs, if you're fixing a lagna or moon placement, they can be indecisive, but they can also be flexible, which can work to your advantage. So once again, not crucial, but just another detail. And last point here, which we're going to cover a little later in one of the lessons, but Gochara and the Dasha cycles. And Gochara is basically the transitions of the planets, so how the planets are transiting for the specific chart you're looking at. So usually when you're looking at somebody's chart and making predictions, you want to look at their birth chart and see where the planets are transiting over their natal positions. So you consider that as well as whatever, dasha they're running, which is the planetary cycles. And, we'll get into that later, but those are important, bigger picture factors. So just like, if the Rashi chart doesn't support the activity, it's not going to come to fruition. Likewise, this is one of those bigger factors you need to really understand. If the dasha cycle, if you're running a really difficult dasha that's hard to get things going, then it's not going to get going. So if the cycle doesn't support it, it's not gonna. So you need to be sensitive to that as well, which we'll get into at the end of this cycle. But just keep that in the back of your head as well. So, and we'll look at that in a couple lessons. Now, looking at more details on pinning it to your specific chart. There's something called the Navtara, and this is a delineation. It's basically splitting up the nakshatras into 3 groups of 9, and this is on most any Jyotish software. If you have Jagannath Hora, on the basic tabs, if you right-click on the basics tab, you'll get a whole list of options, and you'll see Navtara from the moon or Navtara from Lagna. And you can just click on that, and that'll lay out the Navtara scheme for whatever specific chart you're looking at. And the way to check that is you'll want to see, the nakshatra for whatever event you're choosing, see where it's placed. And if it's placed in one of these difficult ones, then it's not a good thing to do. It's one of the challenges to the Muhurta. And once again, this is a way to fine tune it to the specific chart you're looking at. If for some reason you can't find that the Navtara chart, the easy way is a way to do it where you count from your Janma Nakshatra to the one that's in operation, once again inclusive, and then take that number and divide it by 9, and then you can look up the remainder. But as you can see here, if it's the first one, it links back to Janma. You don't want to do it. There's some dangers involved. If it links to the second one, prosperity, it's a good one. 3, Vipat, there's losses and so on. So you can check up which one of those fit into it based on the specific chart. My old teacher said this was specifically important in travel muhurtas, to take into consideration. And there's different opinions with all this knowledge. B.V. Rahman says this is a good and I've heard this from other teachers too, but this is also a good if you want a quick muhurta, you can just check the correlation between your birth chart and this for if you want to do something. And it's another good quick way to look into things. So definitely something to take in consideration when you're fine-tuning a chart. But one thing that has to be looked at with all the others as well. And then a second one is called Veda, and this is a pretty straightforward combination, and basically it's a detailed calculation, and I'm not going to get into all the details here, but basically one nakshatra can obstruct another, and there's a whole elaborate scheme, and it's used for a lot of different things, but the basics are here. So each of these influence each other. So if you are born in Ashwini and the nakshatra you want to do your event on is Jesht, it's not a good idea. Likewise, if you're born in Jesht and the nakshatra you want to do something on is Ashwini, then it's obstructing, so it's not a positive influence. And you can look down the list there, and it's very easy to just look up the nakshatra and see which ones obstruct each other. Now, going from that, we're going to look at some more details, and if you consider all the factors that we just outlined, that gives you a really solid it'll give you a really solid muhurta to work with if you can get as many positive influences lined up based on just that. These things I'm going to present to you now are more for if you want quick muhurtas, if you don't have time to get into all those details, or just day-to-day uses. These things can also be used as even further fine-tuning if you want to get super obsessive about something, and they do have an effect. So it's worthwhile looking at it for important events, but they lend themselves better to day-to-day uses. And first note is for day-to-day things, you don't have to take the birth moon into consideration, but it's really important to take the birth moon for those specific things I showed you when you're getting important activity. Second thing, I talked about this a little in the previous lecture, but a quick, easy way is choosing any activity related to the Vara or the Hour Lord. I had a nice list of the Hour Lords and how to calculate them in the previous lecture on the Panchang. And you can look to which of those lords are ruling specific house in your chart. So, for example, if Mercury ruled my 10th house, that Wednesday could be a good day to go on a job interview, particularly if the Hour Lord was also Mercury. That would be if I was in a pinch and I just needed to, come in for an interview, what day, look at the 10th Lord in your chart, try to pick that day, that hour if possible, and go in there. So that's a quick reference way to pick a time, and you'll have to reflect a bit on the house meanings and see what fits to your purposes. But it's just a general quick way, along with some of the other things I've mentioned. The next one is you want to be careful, and this also applies to all the previous ones too. You might want to take a little more weight on this when you're picking an important event. But if the same planet rules the Tithi and the Agni, the Tithi and the Vara, which are the Jala and the Agni, so that's a Gandanta point, so that's a dosha. So if the same planet rules both those, there's a certain conflict with that planet. Similarly, if the same planet rules the Karana or the Nakshatra, there's a conflict, and there's a Tattva dosha. So basically, the planet as well as the houses it rules in the horoscope really get weakened, as well as those elements of the Panchang. So you want to be careful and watch out for that, in day-to-day choices, but that's also when you're fine-tuning your other times. One quick way to use a muhurta if you have nothing, and this one's just a good general rule, is a Abhijit, which is basically when the sun's directly overhead. It's the high point of the day. The sun gets directional strength at that time, and once again, sun being indicative of the lagna, it supports the lagna, making it that much stronger. So it's a good go-to when you've got nothing else. And the basic calculation is you take between sunrise and sunset, you divide that by 2. And then whatever time you got that, add that to the sunrise, which will give you the midpoint of the day. And then there's a span. So if you can't do something at that exact moment, you can take 24 minutes on either side, which will give you the Abhijit Muhurta. And this is a part of another calculation where astrologers split up the day and the night into different portions, and they allot a nakshatra to each portion. And this is actually a timing called a muhurta, so it's not this it's another use of the word, that term, but and so the nakshatras carry an energy that overlap with the day. I haven't personally seen a consistent list or understanding that I use personally, so I'm not going to teach that here, but just so you know, it does exist out there, and you'll see different things according to different teachers. Definitely an area that needs more research that I haven't had time to look into. But that's what this Abhijit kind of sets that whole structure for the other muhurtas. But Abhijit is definitely a steady, reliable usage based off of that demarcations, and the confusion comes where how the nakshatras get lined up around the Abhijit, which is where some of the confusion goes. But don't need to worry about that for now. You've got enough to work with just based on all these other principles I've been giving you. And another thing to consider here is Rahu Kaalam and Yamaganta. And I've given the calculations here. If you go to My Panchang, they calculate all this for you. So you can look over here, but I've given a chart, and basically you divide sunrise to sunset into 8 different divisions of the day, and then the specific portion is allotted to Rahu on different times of the day. So for example, the 8th portion on Sunday is Rahu Kaalam, and that's a really inauspicious time to do anything. So a lot of people in India will actually use this, and they won't do anything during that time. People will wait to go into meetings before it's over. So it is used on a day-to-day basis, but generally if those times, and this is based on a general sunrise sunset time, so it has to be tailored specific to your location and day, but those Rahu Kaalam times are times to avoid, and same with this. And this Yamaganta is also an inauspicious time. Generally that's more used for traveling, as an inauspicious time to move and go about traveling during your day. And once again, on my Panchang, they lay all this out along with some other details, but these are 2 of the more major ones they list. And then Chogadaya is similar, where you divide the day and night into 8 portions each. Except here, there's actually auspicious times with Amrit, Shubh, and Labh are the most auspicious. Chars in the middle, and then Udve, Kal, and Rog are considered inauspicious and rejected. So that's a simple way to get another auspicious timing that has a little more nuance and is a general day-to-day thing. And you can Google that and you'll find timings available. Now we're going to get into some specific applications when you want to do any important endeavor. There are some things specific to that one indication, and I'm not going to explain too much of these charts. A lot of this information I'm giving you, you're really going to have to sit down with and work through. I've given you the reference here, I've laid it all out for you, and you kind of have to go through it. And a lot of this you guys won't even need or necessarily use so much. So I'll let you read a lot of this on your own, but I'll just give a brief introduction. This slide is more for medical surgeries, and I think it's pretty clear when the moon's in these various spots, you want to avoid operations and those things. And this has to do more with heavy operations, because it involves a lot of cutting, and moon can have an influence on the blood in the body, so it can create more influence in those areas, and so you want to be careful with that. On the bottom too, don't forget, if you are doing some type of medical procedure, check for Sthir Yoga, which is good for administering medicine, as well as all the normal indications we've gone over before. For here, these are travel indications I've given. The signs, the fire signs are strong in the east, the earth signs strong in the south, air signs in the west, water signs in the north. So that's how this kind of logic is laid out. And so you can, just look up best, the days not good to travel those directions on those specific days. So this is a way to nuance, if you have found a good travel muhurta with the other information, to get some more energy behind it. And once again, more details on the bottom with the nakshatras that are good, nakshatras to avoid, titis. Once again, check the Navtara and the Yamaganta, which have a lot more influence on traveling. If you are going to take a big journey, smaller journeys, you don't have to worry so much. You could get a general muhurta. But if it's a big trip or really important trip, or trip somewhere dangerous, you try to pick a good one. And then I've listed, if you are in a pinch and, have to go somewhere quick, you can eat these various items we've listed on the bottom. And most of them have to do with, it's related to the moon and dairy items, and a lot of dairy items can have a purifying effect in a subtle way on the subtle body. So that's why those are given, but just something to use if you're in a pinch. And then once again here, just lots of little details on buying and selling new shares, lending money, borrowing money, One thing to note, these have a lot of business connotations. So, if you are doing muhurtas for things like a business, you have to actually find and pick the chart for when the business actually began, the birth chart of the business. So, whenever it was incorporated, or, whenever it was founded, and that can become a gray area for, to decide when specific things were quote unquote born. So it's not always so simple as when you're choosing a chart for an individual. Same goes for like a nation. There's a lot of debate over the charts of countries, and if you're picking a time for a country to do an action, then you need to take their birth chart as well. So you can pick actions not just for individuals, but you still need some chart to work off of to get the specifics, because you need to, especially for important acts, you have to use that previous information to lock it to the Janma Nakshatra, or, lock it to the specific moon based on that specific birth chart. And you always have to take those other considerations on top of all these little things that are being given here. More indications here: employing a servant, buying, selling a business, making a will, and all these have the reasons for why these aren't just arbitrary placements. So, for example, for making a will, Moon, Lagna Lord should be in fixed signs, because you want that will to be stuck there. You want it to be fixed. You don't want it to change, or somebody to mitigate your wishes after you're long and gone. So, that's one example. And I don't want to get into the reasoning behind all these, because this lecture will take hours. But you can play with it, and you can try to reflect and try to figure out the astrological reasoning for a lot of these. But there is a reason behind it, and the more you know Jyotish, the more you'll see. It'll be very clear why these placements are being given. Another one: buying or selling a business. Mercury, which is Karaka for the 10th house, which is Karaka for business, afflicted by Mars, can bring a lot of issues. And some indications down there for commencing education. Homework. So those are some basic indications, and there's a lot more. There is a book by B.V. Raman called Muhurta, and he gets into other specific applications like marriage, which I haven't touched on, because there's a lot that goes into marriage, and it's a very important endeavor. And I would recommend just going to a professional if you're going to be going around with that. It's generally available. You could probably find a PDF of B.V. Raman's Muhurta if you want even more details, particularly on specific actions. And he gives a lot of other things to take into consideration too, and a little bit of a different flavor to this knowledge. But this is from my teachers. I've worked this in experience, and I think it's a good step-by-step way to look at it. So for homework, I want you to pick out 2 dates for important upcoming events, either for yourself or another person. It'd be a good way to friends or family, if they have something, to try to pick a really important date for them, and go through this information. So just look through the slides and just go one at a time and get a feel for it, and try to get up a panchang, go through it, and I try to lay this out as best as I can, logically, step by step. Especially like with Raman's book or some of these other books, it kind of gets confusing because there's a lot of information. But just start from the beginning of the slides, and you just slowly keep fine-tuning each of the ones over and over to find the best date. But do that. Pick out 2 important dates and send them to me. Give me a rationale, why did you pick this day? But and hopefully it'll be obvious to me, but you could keep it basic, but still give me why, the different factors involved, along with the birth time, so I can see what's matching up, and make sure that you're getting this, because this is a lot of information to put together, but you're really not going to learn it without some practice. So just 2 dates, and then pick out 2 day-to-day things. So you see some of those day-to-day ones, and try to find a good time based on those, just to see how you're working with those. Send me the once again, activity and whatever rationale you got, along with any other extraneous things that you kind of pulled in to choose for your day-to-day usage. But once again, just to make sure you're on the right page with this, and as always, ask questions. So this was a really important lecture, and I've threw a lot of principles at you in a short amount of time, only a couple hours here. So don't be afraid to ask for clarifications, confusions, whatever's coming up. Just drop me a line. Don't sweat it, and hopefully we can get you kind of in the ballpark for this, because once again, it's a really practical, it's a really useful tool to help you through life and help you get through life with as little fuss as possible and working through your karmas. And I hope it's been helpful. And I spent lots of money and time learning all this, and so I've tried to really condense it for you to give you everything I kind of work out of in a nice nutshell. And yes, hope you appreciate it. And good luck with everything. Namaskar.